Hi everybody, welcome back to the Retro Ghetto, and the objective for this video is a simple yet intriguing one. I'm going to be trying to find out the 10 most expensive video games currently listed on the CEX database. I've scoured thousands upon thousands of video games over a total of 30 different systems to find the top 10 most expensive video games currently at CEX. As soon as I had the idea for this video, I genuinely couldn't wait to do the research and put this list together because I was genuinely intrigued to find out which games would be in the list and ultimately which one would hold the elusive #1 spot. This is the time in the video where YouTubers usually say things like, "Oh my god, you won't believe number 4." Just to keep you guys tuned into the end. But genuinely, I was surprised by both number 2 and the #1 spot on this list. Before we get into it, I just want to make you guys aware I will be looking at the mint prices because obviously they are the most expensive video games on the database. However, there is a correlation, and often where a game is the most expensive as a mint version for a system, it will also therefore be the most expensive as a standard copy, and I will be giving you both prices throughout on this list. And I wanted to make sure this list was games only. I will not be including special editions. We're not going to have all singing, all dancing statues and weapons and whatever other weird and wonderful things come attached with special editions nowadays. We're just going to be looking at cold, hard, in-your-hand video games. And lastly, I just want to clarify, we're only going to be looking at PAL versions of games. CEX primarily only take in PAL versions of video games, and I am based in a PAL territory. However, for some reason, there are a few anomalies on the CEX database, most notably with the Nintendo Virtual Boy, of which there's some very expensive games, but they are Japanese and NTSC region games, so we're going to be omitting them from the list and concentrating purely on PAL. With all of that being said, let's do this, shall we? Kicking this list off in the number 10 spot, we have a game that sells mint for £900 and a standard box copy of £700, and that is Mega Man 5 on the Game Boy. Funnily enough, this is the 5th Mega Man entry in the Game Boy handheld system. This 1995 Capcom release is unique in that it had all original bosses, whereas previous Game Boy iterations saw our blue-suited protagonists squaring off against the same recycled enemies from the NES sprites. Notably, this was one of the first games to receive Super Game Boy support, and it was actually the last outing for the original 8-bit NES-style Mega Man sprite, but at £900, that's an expensive goodbye. In at number 9 is the first Super Nintendo entry, and that is Captain Commando. A mint copy of this game will run you £995, whereas a standard box will cost you £625. This Capcom title was originally a 1991 side-scrolling beat-em-up arcade game which was ported to the Super Nintendo in 1995. However, what you'll often find is with later releases on consoles, they have a lower print run, which of course bumps up the price going forwards. It's a very varied beat-em-up with 4 playable characters, including most notably Baby Commando. Yes, you play as a baby in a giant rocket-fueled mech suit. If that's not worth £995, I don't know what is. Okay, so people often ask me, am I going for a full Super Nintendo set? Well, this game, amongst others, is why I always say emphatically, no. Mega Man X3 on the Super Nintendo is the first game to break the £1,000 barrier, with a mint copy costing you £1,095 and a standard box copy costing you £795. Yes, we're just 3 games into this list, and 2 of which have already been Mega Man, and spoiler alert, it's not the last Mega Man you're going to see on this list. Capcom released the X-Series 3rd iteration in PAL territories in 1996, where you ultimately fight to overcome a scientist, Dr. Doppler, and his utopia of maverick followers. At the time, this game was criticised for being too similar to the previously tried and tested formula of other Mega Man releases. With this game being released in 1996, it was right at the very end of the Super Nintendo's lifespan, so once again Capcom did a lower print run on these games, and it's no surprise given the love for the franchise that this game is going for over £1,000 today. Okay, so coming in at number 7, or technically joint 4th because the next 4 games are all £1,100 for a mint copy. This one's actually £700 for a standard box copy, and that is Trip World on the Game Boy. In this 1992 platformer, developed and published by Sunsoft, you play as Yakapoo. It's like saying that. Yakapoo. On his quest to retrieve the Flower of Peace. Yakapoo, like Kirby, can shapeshift into different forms, but as this was a German release only in PAL territories, it will not be shapeshifting into a bargain anytime soon. And next up, we've got the first Sega entry on this list, and that is on the Mega 32X, and that is Darkside. Once again, this game is going to cost you £1,100 for a mint copy or $660 for a standard box copy, although the CEX app does specify with this one that it will come with a manual. One of only 2 games on the 10 most expensive on their database that it says comes with a manual, which says a lot about CEX's current manual policy. Anyway, this 1996 Mega 32X game was a European only release, and again, one of the last releases for the console. Apparently it plays somewhat like a 3D Asteroids, but apparently it's not too great. Scott Reed of Retro Gamer magazine summed this one up by simply calling the game alright, and said that this is a collector's piece and there is no need to go out and spend £1,000 on it. Halfway into this list and we've got our first N64 game, and that is StarCraft 64. Once again, a mint copy of this game will cost you £1,100 with a standard box copy coming in at $650. Blizzard Entertainment managed to avoid the Millennium Bug and release this real-time strategy game in the year 2000 AD. Mass Media Games described the porting of this game to Nintendo 64 as a nearly absurd undertaking, selling every single copy within just a few weeks. That, coupled with the fact that the only PAL release of this game was in Australia, has led to it being a very, very expensive game. Okay, so next up is the last of the £1,100 minters, the last game that is tied for fourth, and that is Primal Rage, again on the Sega Mega 32X. The standard box copy of this game will run you £700, and I think of all the games on this list, this is the best example of rarity being console specific. You can pick this game up for £12 on the Mega Drive, or just £5 unboxed. Yes, you can own this game for a £5. This 1994 arcade fighter by Atari Games was ported to various systems, with the 32X being the only version published by Sega, which could somewhat explain to its rarity. If you're intrigued by this one, I'd pick up the Mega Drive copy. Okay, so we've made it to the top 3. This game will run you £1,200 mint, but CEX currently have in stock a standard box copy of this game for £800, although as you can see, the condition is somewhat dubious, and that is of course Mega Man X2 on the Super Nintendo. As we have already seen on this list, Mega Man games are expensive, none more so than this 1995 Super Nintendo release. This was a direct sequel to the only Mega Man Super Nintendo game that I'm likely to own, Mega Man X. Unlike a lot of other games on this list, this is actually a great game, and whilst I can't justify the price tag it currently carries, this would probably be my first choice of all the games that we've looked at thus far, but I think for now, I'll just make do with my Switch copy. Okay, the penultimate game on this list. In at number 2, we have a game that will cost you £1,250 mint or £750 boxed, and that is Snowboard Kids 2 on the N64. Developed by Raskin, something like that, and published by Atlas, this snowboarding game is of course the sequel to the much more widely available and much cheaper Snowboard Kids. The rarity and therefore the high price on this one comes from the fact that it was released in Japan, America, and most notably the only PAL territory which this game was released was Australia. So if you want a full PAL set, there isn't that many to choose from. Okay, so we've made it to the number 1 spot. I'm sure you guys have been sitting watching along, shouting at various different games that you think is going to be in the number 1 spot. I can tell you personally, I was shocked by this game. But before we crown this game as the most expensive on the CEX database, I just want to ask you guys, if you've enjoyed this video, to give me a thumbs up. I have got something else in the works which is going to be very similar to this list, but I think actually somewhat more entertaining. That'll be dropping next week, so keep it locked to the Retro Ghetto. But without further ado, in at number 1 spot, the only game that will cost you £1,000 for a standard copy, or £1,750 for a mint copy, and that is T-Mech on the Sega Mega 32X. Admittedly, a game I'd never even heard of, this 1994 first-person mech simulator was developed and published by Atari Games. Originally a 2-player sit-down arcade cab, this 32X version was ported in 1995 and features a split screen for 2 players. Widely criticised on its release, IGN actually gave this game just a 4 out of 10, and this game goes to prove that value does not necessarily reflect quality. And there we have it, a mix of obscure rarities mixed with beloved franchises that receive low print runs due to being towards the end of their console's life cycle. Let me know in the comments if you're lucky enough to own any of these games, and if not, which one would you like to add the most to your collection? For me, as I say, it would probably be Mega Man X2, so, you know, Christmas is coming up. Or maybe you've got a spare £11,590 with which to add all 10 mint versions of these games to your collection. As always guys, I appreciate everybody that's taken the time to watch. Again, if you've enjoyed this video, please let me know via the like button, hit that subscribe, and tune in for next week's video where we're going to be doing something very similar, maybe even better. Play your games, keep it retro. I'll see you all then, take care.
Retro Ghetto.